we need to import the model. An animation, if you remember from previously, what we have to do is create a clip depending on the start and the end point of the animation that you should have read there. In my case, my idle starts at 1 because remember 0 was my reference pose, so 0 is my like nothing pose. So I have a 1, and then this is 1 to 118. Then my move is 1 to 1 to 208, my jump and my fall. And I have an impact hit ground impact, which is I actually just took like 1 frame of the jump and just put it in there, which works as well. So let me go to the project. All right. Oops, sorry. I double clicked it, so it's opening in Max. So for each one, if you remember, when you create it, you can press plus to add another one. So let me recreate the idle. So idle, starting at frame 1 to 118. It'll show the example here. I want loop time to be on, yes. And that's all I need to do. Now, occasionally you may have issues. Let me just zoom in and see this one. This one doesn't have it. But occasionally you may have issues where the loop isn't perfect, even though you set it at 1 and 118. A lot of the times that's because of animation compression. So like, let me turn on keyframe reduction. I'm not sure if this will make this mess up. No, okay, but sometimes you'll see like the feet, like a judder, or like there'll be a jerk in the hands because there's keyframe reduction happening. If that happens, what you need to do is a bit more complicated. So you need to go to like to turn on a loop pose. We need to turn on the reference pose. And usually what I'll do is I'll shrink the animation. So if the animation is 1 to 118, I'll shrink it to like 117. I'll do a pose frame at like 116. So I'm just doing like 1 frame each less. And it should still idle. It should still loop pretty well. And you can, it's a little, like it loops fine. So if you're getting a judder and you're getting like a jerk in the animation, do that. So you basically add a reference pose, add a loop pose, and set the pose frame to be like 1 less than your animation. Just shrink your animation a little bit and set a pose frame to be less. So what I need you to do now is just this. Just import your models with the animations on them. Set up the animations like for whatever you have. I have idle, move, jump, and fall. And then we will, just one sec, we will build this prefab together. I have scripts for you that I've put into Discord. We're just making we're just importing the model and cutting up the animations. Do you have your model?
Yeah.
Use the capsule collider, and because it's childed, I can kind of see where's my capsule collider? Where can I see it? And I should be able to edit it. And then I add a rigid line to it. So it has max. And just test that. Cool. So it won't be animating because it hasn't been set up to use an animator yet. But that will, it works and it looks like it. falls on the floor and hits the ground the same position. And I might at this point try to edit the collider and make sure that the feet go on the ground properly. This is where I can add the scripts that I've given you. Okay, we have to take a break now. Hello? We have that in. We've got our rigid body. Have you put this script on yet? Literally just drag it on. So the script is, I want the 3D controller movement script. That goes onto the player. And remember, the robot's still a child. Okay. And let me just open up the script. Like I know it's not programming class, but just real quick. Basically, what it's doing, it's looking for an animator because we need to access the animator in order to tell it to animate. It's looking for a move force, so that's just the acceleration of how fast it's going to move. Jump force for how fast it's going to jump, and then the maximum speed. So the force that it's going to push is the acceleration. The maximum speed is the maximum velocity before it stops adding more force. It's looking for a rigid body, and as we know in Unity, a rigid body is what gives it mass and allows it to fall and be affected by physics. And then it has a current speed and a current vertical speed. These are going to be important because we need to have the current speed and the current horizontal movement speed, so as it moving around, as well as the vertical speed, because we need to feed those values to the animator to tell the animator when to play a walk, when to not play a walk, when to jump. So you should remember this from design practice in first year. Does everyone kind of have a little bit of a hazy memory, or have you been doing this ever since? Basically, all we're doing is we are at the start getting the animator, so we don't have to set it manually. Getting the rigid body. That's all we're doing at the start. On fixed update, I'm setting my current speed, literally just checking my the rigid body's velocity. Velocity not magnitude because I don't care which direction it's facing. I just want to see how fast it's moving in whatever direction it's facing. Does that make sense? And then vertical speed is just its velocity in the y direction. So whether it's moving up or moving down. So if it's moving up, I know that I just jumped. If it's moving down, I know that I'm falling. Simple as that. And if it's not moving up or down, I know that it's on the ground. That all okay? Okay. And then I have this. This is for movement. So I'm have a float called move for the horizontal movement, and a move vert for the vertical movement. So I'm taking these and putting them as numbers, and then the move code is literally just this. So if I am as long as my rigid body is not moving over the maximum speed, add force using the move force. So that's the input.getAxis, because I need to know which direction to add the force in, multiplied by whatever I set move force is, so how fast I want it to go. And then I don't care about the y direction velocity, and then the vertical is the same. I only care about the vertical multiplied by the move force. So I'm only caring about basically WASD or the arrow keys, or if you're using controller, the left controller. So that's adding it in the X and the Z direction. Okay. And then jump code, literally again, very easy. I don't even know why I have this Wii. That's just a print, just to check whether it's working. So if it detects a space, all it's doing is on the rigid body adding force, nothing in the horizontal direction, jump force in the Y direction, which is up in Unity, and then nothing in the Z direction. So it's only adding in the Y direction. So that's all that's doing. It's a very simple code. I don't have any checks. I don't have any like checking whether it's on the ground. I don't have any other special stuff. It's just really simple code. And at the end, all it's doing is telling the animator, because we've already detected the animator, to have a float called speed, big S, and we're going to tell that what the current speed is. Remember that the current speed is the actual velocity independent of direction. We don't care what direction it's going. And then we care about the vertical speed, so like what it's doing. So again, in the animator, basically what we're telling the animator is, am I moving or am I not moving? If I'm moving, I'll tell the animator. The animator will know to play a walk cycle. If I'm not moving, the animator will know to be idle. And then similar to this, if am I jumping or am I not jumping? If I'm jumping, play a jump. If I'm falling, play fall. And then if I stop, go to idle, go to impact, and then go to idle. Does that all make sense? Any questions on this? Like it's as simple as I could make, I think. So we don't really need to know that code, but it's there. And just add in some values for it'll be different depending on your scene. I'm just gonna have the same here. And max speed is gonna be 10. So both of these are gonna start moving now, because they're both looking for the same inputs. So the one that I've just built, you can see it's rolling around and it's not working properly, and that's because I need a rigid body constraint. If you remember that again, that's because it's adding force, but the rigid body doesn't know that it's not supposed to roll around. So let me just make sure you have that on in the constraints, freeze rotation. So this is the complication here. I'm freezing the rotation on the player. The robot is a child. Okay, so the actual player is here. Let me just disable this so it's not confusing. So I have the player. The player has the code. It has the collider. It has the rigid body. It has all the components. The actual robot here has the animator, and below that is like the model. So the player itself doesn't need to rotate. So I can have physics working on it, and I'll know that it's not rotating. If I have raycast happening, I know that there are like fixed locations. And what I can do is I can rotate the child. So that's where my face direction of movement script can go here. So on the child, that's where I can set this. And then like I have two numbers there. I have the turn speed and turn sensitivity. So again, this should be a fairly simple script. And it's just like, basically what it does is just looks for the direction of movement that the parent is going in, and because it's getting the component of parent. And then like if whatever the turn sensitivity is, so if it's very, very sensitive, it'll snap to the new direction instantly. If it's not that sensitive, it'll take a while to turn. So let me show you what that means. So this is 5.0.01. So turn speed, how fast it turns, and how sensitive it is. So that is the current one. And you just sometimes have to play with these numbers. So that's the turn speed. So you see the way like I'm rotating around and it takes a while to turn. It's not instant. And then sensitivity is like how much I have to move in that direction before it starts turning. But I can make that like, for example, 50, and that will be almost instant. See, it snaps around straight away. Whereas at 5, if I go left and right, it takes a little while, so it's a little more natural. But I can help that. Okay, and then turn sensitivity is like how sensitive it is before it moves. So like in this case, it takes a long time before it turns. Which if I have something like a tank, maybe I'll do something like that. So the sensitivity of the turn is much lower, and the turn speed could be like much lower as well. So this would be like tank movements. See the way like it's much slower to turn around. And then if I want something like this number works pretty well. I don't have the animations hooked up. This is just literally like to face the direction and to move. Okay. Any questions on this so far? me just come over. Right click, create an animator controller. I'll call this robot animator controller. And on the robot, drag that into where it's looking for a controller. You just need to drag that in there. And then we need to assign it the animations. If I double click on the controller, it opens up the animator window. And I'll look for where I imported the robot. Because I cut up the animation clips here, why is idle here? I don't need that idle. All right. That should appear as animations here. And because they're here, so first of all, let me just drag them in. Because they're here, if I edit them, so if I'm like, ooh, the idle's maybe going a little too long, actually let me make it like 117, and I apply, they'll automatically update in the animator because they're referencing that prefab. So that's a handy way to do things. Again, if you remember from first year, right click on the idle, set as layer default, so it's going to start on the idle. So because that animator is linked here, my script will automatically look for it. So even though there's nothing here, when I start pressing play, it'll look for it automatically, and it should assign it there. Perfect. So we know that the script is telling the animator two things. It's telling it speed with a big S, and it's telling it vertical speed, small v, big S. So we need to add those parameters to the animator. So in the animator, under parameters, we'll add, they're both floats, they're both numbers. So one is big S, P-E-D, and one is vertical speed, small d, big S. And let me just test that before I hook anything up. And just, I can look at it and see whether, perfect. So you see what I meant about it like being 0 point some tiny number? It never exactly goes to 0. It's like always within that actual little tiny number. So there's speed moving up to a maximum of 10, and it's not perfect. It'll always go a little bit above, a little bit below. And then when I stop moving, it drops down too. So it's never exactly 0, because it's always slightly moving. So we just need to be careful. That's why we have that low buffer zone. Also, this rigid body seems to have less drag than the other one. See, if I stop moving, it still it's like slides a bit more because I don't have any friction in this one. Does the other one have a physics material? No, it doesn't. It just has drag. Probably because it's using a capsule as well instead of the box. Okay. Alright, so we know the speed is working, but we haven't hooked up the animations yet. So on idle, that's what it's going to start as. We want to hook up the move. So right click on idle, make transition to move. And that transition is going to use a condition. And the condition is the speed is greater than 0.1. And make sure the exit time is off. Anyone remember why exit time needs to be off? No. So exit time, let me turn it on. So if I press play with exit time on, let me just look at the idle. You see the way it's finishing the idle here? So let me move. It's not playing the move yet. Now it's playing the move. So exit time means that the animation that was previously playing needs to complete before it allows it to transition to the next one, which in this case I don't want. I want it to transition to anybody. Also notice that my move is really slow, right? Let me play it again. So this is the one that I already set up, and that one the move is working correctly, and this one the move is really slow. So this particular robot was designed as something that moves very slowly, so that's why the animations are so slow. But in my case, it doesn't work with this. I can go back to 3ds Max, shorten the animation, tweak all that stuff, or in the animated controller on the move, if I click on move, I can just be like, yeah, just play that at like, let's say 5 times. I think the other one's 5 times. So it'll play at 5 times speed, whatever my animation is. And that's basically correct. Now it doesn't go back to idle because we haven't set the going back to idle thing yet. But you see like the animation is much better. So make a transition back. And this one my condition is this is 1. Test again. That's pretty good. Okay. So that's all set up. And I just need to do the final thing, which is my jump, my fall, and going back to idle. So for jump, again, if you remember, we want it to happen from any state, because I might be idling when I jump, I might be moving when I jump. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. So from any state, right click, make transition to jump. And this one is going to be vertical speed greater than 0.1, it'll jump. And then make transition here. And if vertical speed is less than 0.1, it'll fall. And then we go straight from fall back to idle. So you might actually notice that, sorry, 1 second. This one even. So you might notice if I press play and jump, that the motion is kind of jerky. So if I jump, see the way the one that's already set up is fine, but this new one is like it's jerking around, like the animation is kind of jerky when it's jumping. See that? Like it's so why that is because the jump is constantly restarting and restarting, because it's going from any state, meaning it can even transition to itself. All we need to do is on that transition settings, make sure it can't transition to itself. So any other state can transition to jump, but jump can't transition to jump. So it'll continuously play jump and finish the jump before it like loops it, which now makes it much smoother. The problem with this animation is not going to. Oh, I messed up here. Vertical speed is less than -1. It seems to go to jump a bit too easily, so I might change the vertical speed to be a little more, require a little more vertical speed before it does the jump. Much better. No, slow transition. So it never goes to full. Why is that? No, it's a please. Is that the reason? Okay, so it does go full. I'm back out. Okay. He said I didn't have a. I had exit time on.